Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Daybreak, South Korea's parliament proposes 2 bills aimed at improving the shocking human rights situation in North Korea. Lawmakers want them approved before the year is out. The South Korean military carries out a drill aimed at defending the nation's easternmost Dokdo Island from external intruders. Plus, Iran and 6 world powers will resume talks on Tehran's nuclear program next month after a second bid to resolve the issue fails. The deadline for striking a deal has been extended until June next year. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Tuesday, November 25th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. And we begin at South Korea's National Assembly, where lawmakers have begun reviewing bills on improving the grave human rights situation in North Korea. This following a UN resolution on this issue last week. They aim to pass legislation by the end of the year, but the rival parties are still poles apart on some very key issues, as our Ji Myung-gil reports.
The National Assembly is stepping up efforts to pass bills on North Korean human rights, in line with recent efforts from the international community. The Parliamentary Foreign Affairs Committee on Monday began reviewing 2 bills related to North Korean human rights, one proposed by the ruling Saenuri Party and the other by the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy. The ruling party's bill focuses on documenting violations carried out by Pyongyang and developing plans to improve human rights conditions in the north.
A national archive should be set up separately to deal with storing and keeping record of human rights violations in North Korea.
The main opposition's bill puts an emphasis on supporting the North Korean people through humanitarian aid.
A consultative body will be established within the Unification Ministry to engage in aid projects for the North Korean people.
Both parties say they hope to pass the bills by the end of this year. But the 2 rival parties will first have to resolve their long-standing differences over the issue. A main source of contention is a suggestion from the ruling Saenuri Party that the human rights bill include government assistance to activist groups that fly anti-North Korea leaflets across the border. The main opposition party says if the bill includes any language indicating support for such groups, they will not pass it. The National Assembly has put the revised bills on the human rights issue up for discussion several times since its first proposal back in 2005. Previous plans for the bills on the issue were shelved due to concerns mainly from the opposition party that pursuing such legislation could escalate inter-Korean tensions. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, a joint railway project involving both Koreas and Russia is about to kick off. South Korean officials are now in North Korea for a trial to transport Russian goods from a port in North Korea. For a look at how the supplies will end up here in South Korea and how the process will work the other way round, our Lee Ji-eun reports.
Over 40,000 tons of Russian coal will land on South Korean soil this week. What's so special about that is that the coal will actually travel through North Korea. A group of South Korean officials arrived in the North Korean port of Najin on Monday to oversee a test run scheduled for this Friday. This test run will include delivering the coal from the Russian station of Hasan to Najin on a 54-kilometer railway. Once the coal reaches Najin, it will be shipped on a Chinese bulk carrier to South Korea's southeastern port of Pohang. So what's in it for these 3 countries as they get ready to mark the first test run of the Najin-Hasan project? Russia sees the new export route as a gateway to opening up its far eastern regions. North Korea is looking to develop the Najin port to not only export resources like coal from Russia and China, but also to move manufactured goods from South Korea and Japan into Asia. For South Korea, the project will cut down shipping costs and promote more trade with other European countries. Experts say the project might also help mend inter-Korea relations and build trust between the two countries. South Korea banned investments in North Korea after the regime torpedoed a South Korean warship in 2010, suspending almost all inter-Korean economic projects. The government, however, has allowed the consortium to indirectly invest by purchasing Russian stakes in the initiative. Lee-jun, Arirang News.
And while we're on the topic of ties with Russia, and specifically North Korea's ties with Moscow, Pyongyang's special envoy Choi Ryong-hae has wrapped up his week-long trip to Russia. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency reports that Choi, who is a close aide to leader Kim Jong-un, returned to Pyongyang with his delegation on Monday. During his visit, he delivered a personal letter from the young leader to Russian President Vladimir Putin, signaling the possibility of a summit next year. The trip is being seen as part of Pyongyang's efforts to improve its ties with Moscow, as the regime finds itself increasingly isolated from its longtime ally, Beijing. The South Korean military held its biannual defense drills around Korea's easternmost Dokdo Island on Monday. A military official said the country's army, navy, air force and the Coast Guard all took part in the one-day training with the aim to stop external forces landing on Dokdo. The Marine Corps, however, did not take part due to bad weather in the area. The Japanese embassy in Seoul protested the exercise, which the Korean government later flatly rejected. Japan falsely claims ownership of the rocky islets. Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following on this Tuesday morning here in Seoul. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news centre. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. Well, it's official. Negotiations in Vienna has failed to yield a comprehensive agreement between world powers and Iran on the country's nuclear program, with talks to continue through June 30th or July 1st of next year. That gives negotiators at the six world powers and Iran 7 more months to iron out the differences that still remain. They'll reconvene next month at a venue to be announced. Under an interim nuclear agreement, Tehran will continue to have access to some $700 million worth of sanctions relief, under the understanding that it will refrain from sensitive nuclear activity. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry characterized the talks as tough but substantial, while Iranian leader Hassan Rouhani said most gaps had narrowed during the talks. The so-called P5+1 and Iran had been locked in negotiations in Vienna over a potential deal that would curb Tehran's nuclear development in exchange for lifting sanctions that have crippled Iran's economy. And U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel has announced he will step down from his top military post just after 2 years of service. The first enlisted combat veteran to serve in the role, Secretary Hagel said it had been the great privilege of his life to lead and, most importantly, to serve the men and women of the Defense Department. U.S. President Barack Obama said he and Hagel had met on multiple occasions to determine that it was an appropriate time for him to complete his service, while praising him as an exemplary defense secretary. The New York Times, citing senior administration of sources, said that Hagel, who was Obama's ally in the U.S. Senate as a critic against the Iraq War, was brought in to manage the withdrawal from Afghanistan and an environment of decreasing military budgets. The 68-year-old will continue as secretary until his successor is confirmed. And staying with the U.S., a grand jury decision is expected within hours in Ferguson, St. Louis, on whether Officer Darren Wilson, who is white, will be indicted in the shooting death of African-American teen Michael Brown back in August 9th. Various reports say a decision has been reached and will be announced at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Buildings had been boarded up in the racially divided city of St. Louis ahead of the announcement, as hundreds of protesters rallied. The governor of Missouri had earlier declared a state of emergency and called in the National Guard to help keep the peace. And finally, the Islamic State group has released another propaganda video, this time showing dozens of Kazakh children appearing with assault rifles at a training camp. The video says the young recruits were some of its, quote, newest brothers from the land of Kazakhstan, as the children shouted in Arabic, "God is great." The children appear to be between the ages of 4 and 12, undergoing a series of drills under a leader's supervision.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now back to domestic news, and a center for the creative economy has opened in Korea's southwestern province of Jeollabuk-do. Cutting the ribbon on the center on Monday, President Park Geun-hye said she hoped it would play a key role in developing Korea's carbon fiber industry. Our Hwang Ji-ae reports.
For the first time since taking office, President Park Geun-hye visited Jeollabuk-do province on Monday to celebrate the opening of a creative economy center. Park said the center should act to harmonize traditional and new growth engines.
특히 전통 문화와 농생명, 탄소 산업의 대도약을 이루기 위해 약한 부분을 보완하는 연결고리가 되어야 합니다.
The Creative Economy Center in Jeollabuk-do province aims to boost the carbon fiber industry as Korea's next growth engine. It's the third center of its kind established under the Park administration's pledge to boost startups. Each local center teams up with one of the country's largest conglomerates to support venture companies in that related industry. The one in Jeollabuk-do province is partnered with Hyoseong Group.
작년에 준공된 효성 공장에서 생산되는 탄소 섬유는 수천 년간 제조업의 기본 소재였던 철을 대체할 미래 산업의 쌀로 주목받고 있습니다.
Hyoseong Group and Jeollabuk-do province plan to create a fund of roughly $9 million to foster the country's carbon fiber industry. They will also build a center for startups within Hyoseong's carbon fiber factory in the region. And through that, they aim to foster 20 startups in the carbon fiber sector into becoming global companies within the next 3 years. The government plans to establish a total of 17 creative economy centers across the country with involvement from conglomerates like Samsung and Hyundai. Hwang Ji-ae, Arirang News.
Korea's Fair Trade Commission will launch an inquiry into the product pricing of the world's largest furniture retailer, IKEA, which will open its first store in Korea next month. This comes in response to allegations the company has set higher prices in Korea, up to nearly double the price seen in other parts of the world. An official from the watchdog told reporters Monday that a consumer group will be tasked with comparing IKEA's retail prices in Korea to other countries. The results will be published around February. While the report does not insinuate the Swedish giant is up to anything fishy, the Commission says the findings will help consumers make smarter choices and may pressure IKEA to voluntarily cut its prices. Korean stocks got a boost on Monday on the back of growing speculation. China has plans to cut its key interest rate for a second consecutive month following its unexpected cut last Friday. Korea's benchmark Kospi rose 0.7% on the first day of the trading week, edging ever so slightly closer to the psychologically important 2,000 level. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Another rate cut by the world's second largest economy is expected, as Friday's cut in its main benchmark interest rate may not be enough to boost growth. Park Seok-jung, an economist for high investment and securities, says increases in China's money supply, including its cash and savings deposits, rose a mere 12.6% in November, falling below its yearly target of 13%. Kim Kyung-han, an analyst for Hana Taeju Securities Company, predicts Beijing will cut its main rates by up to 40 basis points in 2015 due to its weak fundamentals concerning consumption and real estate. China's retail sales shrank by 1 percentage point to 12% in the first 9 months of this year, according to China's National Bureau of Statistics. The country's real estate climate index stood unchanged from the previous month at 95 in September, below the benchmark 100, which points to depression in business activity for land capital and sales of real estate. Friday's cut in China's main benchmark interest rate was a first in 28 months, which lowered its one-year lending rates by 40 basis points to 5.6%. The move led to gains in Korean shares on Monday, particularly those related to steel and oil products, as it's expected China will import more of these goods to boost economic activity. Korea's benchmark Kospi rose 0.7% from the previous trading day to close at about 1,980 points, buoyed by expectations the Chinese economy will recover following Beijing's bold stimulus measures. Kim Jeon, Arirang News.
Now, more than half of Korea's largest companies saw their profits tumble in the first 3 quarters of the year, due largely to the sluggish global economy. Seoul-based market researcher Chaebol.com says the combined operating profits of 55 of the top 100 listed firms on the Kospi stood at roughly $23 billion in the January to September period. That's down almost 30% from the same period last year. The drop has pushed the operating profit of all 100 listed firms together down as well by more than 15% over the same period. 3D printing technologies have come forward leaps and bounds in recent years, but now a new era has arrived where people can scan objects with their hands thanks to a mobile 3D camera that's been developed by researchers based right here in Korea. Our Son Jung-in reports.
3D printing, which has been referred to as the third industrial revolution, opened up a new era where people can access to 3D scanning and printing at their fingertips. Korea's Electronics and Telecommunications Research Institute has developed a 3D scanning system that allows users to send 3D printable files from their smartphones.
The key of this technology is the free mobility of the device, which the users can easily scan the desired object and send the data in real time.
Researchers from the institute incorporated handheld 3D scanner technology, also developed by local engineers. By attaching a small camera onto a smartphone, it transforms the phone into a 3D scanner that works as the user moves the device in their hands. Users can test its effectiveness through simulation before printing to avoid any possible mistakes. The technology is expected to be commercialized by first half next year and be put to use in a wide range of areas.
We plan to supply the device to schools with professional designers. Since it is locally developed, we can produce it at 1/10 the price of other foreign-made products.
The global 3D scanner market is growing at 12% every year. Local researchers hope this new device helps them become leaders of the industry in the future. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And a good Tuesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the ongoing issue with Kia Tigers' Yang Hyun-jung and his quest to go over to the major leagues. Now, although reports initially surfaced that the Minnesota Twins were the highest bidder over the weekend, turns out that might have been a false rumor. Now, with the Kia Tigers still mum on who the highest bidder was and how much the final bid was for the lefty ace, new reports have surfaced on Monday stating that the Minnesota Twins were not the highest bidders, but the Texas Rangers. The new report also added that the highest bid was roughly $1.5 million, but both the Kia Tigers and Yang Hyun-jung will wait until the 28th to reveal their final decision. If Yang does join the Rangers, he's set to play alongside another Korean star in Chu Shin-soo. And shifting over to the LPGA, where the final tournament of the season capped off an incredible season for one team as 17-year-old Lydia Ko finished off the year with a bang after winning the CME Group Tour Championship. Now, what initially started off as Park In-bi versus Stacey Lewis turned into an incredible run by Korean native Lydia Ko, who would finish tied for first at 10 under par after the final hole. And after winning the fourth sudden death playoff hole, the teen sensation claims the $500,000 prize. But with the victory, she also won the race to the CME Globe, cashing in another $1 million in prize money for a total of $1.5 million, the largest payout in women's golf history. Meanwhile, Stacey Lewis, who finished tied for ninth, would clinch this year's LPGA Player of the Year honors, beating out her rival Park In-bi. Well, it certainly was disappointing to see Park In-bi fall short in her quest for a back-to-back Player of the Year honors, but it wasn't all bad as the Korean golfer did finish the year #1. Now, a roller coaster of a season for Park In-bi, who started off the year at #1 before losing that spot to Stacey Lewis after struggling quite a bit in the first half of the season. The 26-year-old would fix her putting problems and eventually improve her game once again to retain her #1 ranking towards the end of the year. And despite Stacey Lewis claiming the 2014 LPGA Player of the Year honors, Park accumulated enough points to hold on to her #1 world ranking going into the 2015 season. And finishing things off in swimming, Chinese swimmer Sun Yang certainly had a roller coaster of a year himself, with controversies off the swimming pool and then dominating performance at the Incheon Asian Games. But new reports show he was caught with a banned substance before the Asian Games. In a report issued on Monday, the Olympic gold medalist was tested positive for a banned substance back in May and served a 3-month suspension, which was never revealed prior to the Incheon Asian Games. However, the Chinese argue that he did face the suspension either way and doesn't affect his participation at the Incheon Asian Games. Meanwhile, Sun Yang finished the recent Asian Games with 3 gold medals and a silver medal. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. I'm Lee Ji-yeon here with your latest weather updates. Well, lingering rain from yesterday still falling in some parts, but eventually it will all go away and things will get even clearer as the day goes on. And temperatures will continue to be on the mild side. Daily lows are kicking off what it was like yesterday, and the top temperatures will elevate higher today, hovering mid-teens at about 15 degrees Celsius across the region. So with that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the daily low in Seoul started out at 7, and the daytime high in Seoul and Daegu will rise to 14, and that's about 2 degrees higher than yesterday, while Gwangju and Busan will peak at 15 this afternoon. Now, let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju Island will rise to 14 later on, and Daejeon will peak at 13. Dokdo tops out at 10, and Mount Keungang remains chilly or cold at -1. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Okay, well, that's all we have for now. For more of the latest stories, don't forget to check out either our smartphone application or our website, arirang.co.kr/news. Korea Today is coming up in half an hour's time. Goodbye.